Christina Applegate is in New Jersey, investigating her grandmother Lavina's unexplained past.
I'm very excited, but I'm a little nervous because I heard from Joseph Shumway, the genealogist I met earlier, and he found a large number of court documents related to my grandparents' marriage. So now I'm heading to the New Jersey State Library to meet with family law professor Meredith Sholick. I'm really hoping she can help me decipher the information in these court records.
Okay, so the first document we're going to start with is actually a complaint that was filed by your grandmother.
By my grandmother?
By your grandmother. So she filed a complaint in 1942.
Okay.
After they had separated.
October?
Of 1942.
Okay. My father was born in November 1942, so my grandparents. They separated.
They separated before,
right before he was born.
So this complaint is actually her attempt to enforce the separation agreement that they created when they first separated.
Wait a minute, when did they first separate?
Well, do you want to take a look?
The complaint, Lavina v. S. Applegate, says that following the said marriage, she and the defendant resided in the said city of Trenton, New Jersey until around the 10th day of August. Wow, oh, really? Okay.
So for a couple of months.
And then they separated. So the defendant, after his marriage to complainant, okay, wait. Began to treat her cruelly and brutally, accusing her of immoral acts, charging her that she was guilty of adultery, by reference calling her vile and indecent name. Oh, God, Grandpa. And on various dates struck and beat her. On account of which she left him on or about the 10th day of August. Okay. In October 1941, defendant left the city of Trenton and took up his residence in Wilmington, Delaware.
Yes.
So my grandpa left. Okay, so, but subsequently, on or about the 10th day of January 1942, Lavina returned to him in Delaware. Okay.
And I think it's important to say that she went back to him upon his promise to treat her properly.
Upon his promise. Notwithstanding his promise, the defendant did not treat her properly, but resumed and continued his cruel, brutal, and abusive treatment of her, and did, on or about the 13th day of May, pack most of complainant's clothes and personal effects and tell her to get back to Trenton. So he kicked her out. On the following day, defendant called for complainant and took her to the office of an attorney in Wilmington, where an agreement was drawn and signed by both of them. Complainant did on the 14th day of May, 1942, in consequence of the cruel and abusive treatment, leave him, and has ever since lived apart. Under the terms and provisions thereof, defendant covenanted to pay complainant the sum of $15 per week, so he then started giving her money.
Well, he was supposed to.
He had to, okay, so he was supposed to give her $15 a week.
That's right.
Defendant has not made any of the weekly payments.
Right.
He didn't pay for anything.
At least according to what she's saying.
It all is just like, it's making so much sense now. Like, she probably had my father, and she can't take care of him because she's 21 years old. She can't get work. Of course, my dad has to be raised by his grandmother. All right, let's see what happens here.
Okay, so what we don't have a copy of, but what I know from reading these documents is back in the beginning of 1945, they divorced. At that time, the judge awarded custody to your grandmother. And Paul filed with the court asking for custody of your father in June of 1945. So this is what we have is the most complete statement from Paul about what's going on and why he thinks he should have custody.
Okay, all right. In answer to my former wife's petition for alimony and counsel fees, I say that I have read her petition and affidavit, and the contents thereof are not true. Particularly, it is not true that my former wife is without means of support except from her exertions. Okay, so he's saying she is making money, she has a job.
I shouldn't have to pay her alimony.
I shouldn't have to pay it, okay.
Okay.
So next, my grandfather Paul claims that even though he and my grandmother Lavina separated in May of 1942, he repeatedly asked her to reconsider, but she said no. On January 10th, 1943, I learned that my wife had moved in with Michael Constant. So now he's saying that she's now living with this guy and my dad.
Yes.
They were arraigned on the charges of adultery.
Because at that time, adultery was against the law.
Okay, so he had them arrested.
Yes.
This is not even, is this like a joke? This is insane.
Christina Applegate is examining court documents related to her grandparents' intense custody battle over her father, Bob. She is about to find out what happened next in the case, according to her grandfather's affidavit.
She, at that time, made a statement that she thought she would be happier if I would grant her a divorce.
So my grandfather goes on to say that although he agreed to divorce, he was still very much in love with my grandmother and hoped to reconcile. Paul claims that one night, Lavina asked him to pick up their son and take him to her apartment while she was out. So Paul says he waited for her there until early morning, at which time Lavina allegedly came home in a drunken stupor and they ended up having sex. So clearly, they were still having relations, according to my grandfather. But it also looks like Lavina was still involved with this Michael Constant.
My God, this is just nuts. All this time, the divorce was pending. Finally, the hearing came on after I refused to support her. She accepted the money from me, the support for my son. So child support, no alimony. All right.
So these are the exhibits that attach to it. And then this is the doctor note.
Okay, to whom it may concern, this is to certify that I treated Robert William Applegate for pneumonia. It was also my opinion that he was suffering from malnutrition. Malnutrition. I'm just angry at these two people. I'm so angry at them.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's see what's going on with her.
So this is Lavina's side.
This is Lavina's side to the whole thing.
That's right.
June of 1945.
So Lavina refutes Paul's accusations, claiming that she never did live with Michael Constant. Then she alleges that my grandfather was always drunk and threatening, and that he never contributed to their baby's welfare. She asserts that she was a good mother, that she's never been in a drunken stupor, and that in my dad's 2.5 years of life, the bout of pneumonia was the only time he was seriously ill.
Okay, but the doctor also said he had malnutrition, and she's saying that she always cared for okay. I never left the baby alone, and when for any reason I was obliged to go out, I placed him in the care of my mother, or Mrs. Ann Graham, who occupies the apartment above. Okay.
She included statements from Ann Graham. This is her neighbor and landlord.
This is all.
Right, sort of background about who she is.
She's a good tenant. She's never had any disturbances. She's always paid her rent. There's never been any man in her apartment that stood there overnight. In fact, I've never seen any other man there except for Paul Applegate. I know that Mrs. Applegate idolizes her baby and that she practically lives for him. The baby has a sweet disposition and as healthy as babies come. What's interesting to me, though, is in her rebuttal, she never makes mention of the abuse anymore. Wouldn't you think that if you were trying to win a custody battle, that you would say, this guy is an abusive, beat me to a pulp alcoholic? That's interesting, because if it was me, I would, you know what I mean? Let's skip on.
Okay, this is the last court document we were able to find, okay?
All right.
So this is
The final order.
final order from
This is
June.
June 1945. After reviewing both sides, this is what now the judge has come to an agreement
That's
about,
right. So just
of what's going to happen to my father.
That's
Okay.
right. So just before we go into sort of what
Okay.
the judge ordered, just a little bit of context. So at this point in the United States, when children were young, the courts almost automatically always gave custody to the mother. So, but the only way that Paul could get custody was to prove Lavina unfit.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay. After duly considering the petitions, it appears that the defendant has failed to show by a preponderance of evidence that the petitioner is unfit and unqualified to retain custody of the infant child, and that his welfare is best served by remaining in the custody of the mother. He's going to continue to live with his mother. He said he never knew his mother, and yet he lived with her for all of these years. Okay,
Well, at least
until this
he's
was
about-
signed.
This is about, he's about 2.5.
Because maybe she is completely unfit and they have to take him away from her. Okay.
Unfortunately, this is the last court order that we were able to find.
But I want to know how he ends up at his grandmother's.
I would love to be able to tell you right
know.
now, here's a court order from 1947 and this is what happened, but unfortunately we don't have that. And there could be lots of reasons why there aren't any other court orders. You know, they could be lost, it could have been a private arrangement. The other thing is that Lavina may have passed away. And that could be why custody was changing at that point.
That's what happened.
So do you know when your grandmother passed away?
Okay, my dad said he was probably around 8.
So I think that we can go next door to the state archives, and I think we might be able to find out when your grandmother passed away if there's a death certificate.
Okay.
All right, so
All right, let's do
how
it.
about we